What the heck is a Sonic game? Unfortunately, that answer is not nearly as cut and dry as you would think. While the original games mostly built on one another and refined the formula introduced by the first game, ever since Sonic's jump to 3D, his games have had a very different vibe at times. Generally speaking, there are two major eras of 3D games, those being the Adventure era and the Boost era. And while we have gotten games that don't fit into either of these categories but are still in 3D, these are the two eras that I will mostly refer to. I am going to review all of the Sonic games that I have played, and eventually I will also review a lot of the handheld titles, though they have followed a completely different path at times. So, I hope you enjoy this. Just sit back, relax, and I'll talk about some Sonic. The first game I'm going to talk about is actually Sonic Adventure DX. And yes, I do mean specifically DX since I have not played the original, but I'm going to do my best to try and convince you to play this version of the game. Although, if you ever do get a copy of a Dreamcast game, then you might want to play that, just because I hear it's a little bit better than the port. But regardless, this is what I grew up with, so this is what I'm going to talk about. I don't have any experience with anything else. I may talk about the classics at some point, but, I haven't beaten any of them except for the first one, and I have very limited experience with them compared to everything else, so I don't feel like it's my place to comment on those games. I do, however, feel like I have a lot to say about the 3D games. I'm going to include gameplay footage for this video, which I won't have the luxury of doing for some of the other games, especially the handheld ones. But basically, one of the main draws for this game, at least for me, is the number of playable characters and their different play styles. So I'm going to showcase a little bit of gameplay for each. As you can see right now, I'm playing Sonic's first level. It is by far one of the better stages in the game. It's called Emerald Coast, and Sonic has a very interesting moveset. He runs fast, and he can do the spin dash, which appeared in the classic games. And you get a couple power-ups throughout the game that increase your moveset by a little bit. Moves that you have to charge up, which is why you see that lighting effects start to happen whenever I do a spin dash in this. But overall, Sonic's stages are basically about getting to the objective as quickly as possible, and that is how they're played. They do have a definitive end to them, and that is really par for the course for Sonic, but I just figured I should mention his playstyle regardless, even though a lot of us already know what it's like. I'm not going to show the entire stage for each of these characters just because that would make the video way too long, but I will say Sonic's story is the longest in the game, and his stages are some of the longest in the game, so he does make up the bulk of the story and the game for the most part, which if you're really into playing as Sonic, you'll be happy to hear. Next up we have Tails. His gameplay is very similar to Sonic's in that you are going through the stage to reach the goal. The main differences between Tails and Sonic are that Tails has the flight ability. You can't fly forever, but you can fly through some rings, which will increase the distance you cover by flying. And as long as you land on something, you won't die after you fly, as long as you don't hit a death plane. So it's really interesting to see how you get through these stages as Tails, because he can get through them sometimes a lot faster than Sonic can. And you are racing against other characters, normally Sonic, but occasionally you'll race against someone else. But you basically just go as quickly as you can, flying by the stage until you reach the goal. Now let's talk about Knuckles. Knuckles has treasure hunting style gameplay. Each level sees you looking for different shards of the Master Emerald. There are 3 per stage, but they are in different places each time you play the stage, so that keeps it a little bit more interesting for subsequent plays. I feel like this is also a good time to mention that the missions you're seeing at the beginning of this footage are not necessarily the missions for the story mode. There are alternate missions that you can try to complete after you've beaten the story. And you unlock each character by meeting up with them in another character's story. So you have to play as Sonic first, but then once you start unlocking other characters, you can complete them at whatever pace you like. Knuckles has a bunch of different moves that allow you to get to the emeralds. You can punch, you'll eventually unlock the ability to dig into the ground, and all of this is aided by a radar system, which in this particular game actually targets all 3 emerald shards at once. It's different in the sequel, but that's actually how this one works. It's targeting all 3 of them at once, and if you get close to them, it's like a hot and cold situation. So the radar will be faster and faster and changing color the closer you are to the objective. Let's move on to talking about Amy. Amy is a little bit slower than a lot of the other characters, but she's a lot more capable than people give her credit for. She is chased in each stage by a robot named Zero, and unfortunately there's nothing you can do to destroy Zero. You simply have to avoid him as a stage hazard. And you have a weapon, a hammer, that you can use to hit things, defeat enemies, and as you can see here, you can also use it to perform some really high jumps. I was able to perform this move as a kid, but I never really understood how it worked. And what it actually is once Amy reaches top speed when she's running, she will pull out her hammer, and if you hit the action button when the hammer comes out, you'll do the flip. You can also jump and flip a little bit lower with the hammer, and if you come out of that jump and flip, you can actually hit the hammer button immediately to perform the higher flip without having to reach top speed first. Now, Amy's story is the shortest in the game. She has only 3 stages that she goes through, and I really think that's a shame, but hopefully you'll enjoy playing as her. The next character I'm going to talk about is Gamma. Gamma is one of Eggman's robots that he created, and his story is a real tearjerker at times. His gameplay mainly consists of firing at enemies using a lock-on missile. You have a time limit, which I've honestly never understood. But getting extra time is pretty easy. You just fire at enemies or other things that are worth time, and once you shoot them, you'll gain the time. You can lock on to some other things besides just enemies, so it's really just a matter of seeing what you can do to progress through the stage. Some people are capable of getting through his entire story without getting time over once. I unfortunately am not always one of them. I've gotten time over on his stages in the past, especially some of the longer ones. This one is his version of Emerald Coast, so yes, different characters go through the same stage. It's just catered towards their ability a little bit, and his version of Emerald Coast is actually very short. You'll see it ends about right here when you collect this guy. Which seems like a good segue into the large purple elephant in the room. Those with keenly trained eyes may have seen that I skipped over someone in the character selection, and that is because it is the infamous Big the Cat. Big is one of the most widely hated parts of this game, and if you have watched the Game Grumps play through this game, you know they had a really hard time with it. But honestly, I have really fond memories of playing as Big, and it's because I find it relaxing personally, And I'm going to make you watch this entire playthrough of his Twinkle Park stage because Froggy is very rarely put in a place that is hard to reach, and even when he is, you can get him pretty quickly. You'll see the stage only takes me about 2 minutes. I really don't understand why everybody has so much trouble with it. I mean, it works on the principle that Froggy is just like any other fish. You have control of your lure when it's in the water, and as long as you wiggle it around, even if he doesn't bite on the first try, you may be able to get him the next time. Just wiggle your lure, move it around where Froggy's area is, and try to get him. So, that's my thoughts on the whole situation. And I just think that Big's music is relaxing at times, like especially his version of Emerald Coast's music. The one complaint I actually have with Big's gameplay is that there are a lot of extra areas which you can explore and get to in some of these stages, but Froggy is never in those areas. Sure, sometimes they'll lead to power-ups, and I think they might actually be areas where you're supposed to find things for the other objectives, because you have to find fish that are a certain weight before you catch Froggy, and that is how the later objectives work. But I really wish they would have done more with that, because you actually use his fishing pole to access areas of the stage, sometimes that even other characters can't. So it's really a shame to me that that part of this gameplay wasn't fleshed out as much as it could have been. But anyways, that wraps up the characters. So, just watch me catch Froggy, and then we'll move on to one final thing that there is in the gameplay. The last part of the gameplay is the game's side mode, the Chao Garden. This mode actually appeared in the original Dreamcast game. They made some improvements to it after the release of this port, and the Sonic Adventure 2 version is even better. But basically, you get to raise these little critters. I'm about to do something I'll regret. I didn't realize the spin dash actually works in this game, in the Chao Garden, because it doesn't in the sequel, the battle version at least. But I'm gonna have to comfort this Chao. Basically, you raise the Chao from the egg that you find in the garden, or as I will show you in a minute, buy from the black market, and you can raise its stats, even give it a name. I haven't really given any of the Chao in this game a name, just because I like the Sonic Adventure 2 version a lot more, and so I play that one a lot more, and I give the Chao names in that one and whatnot. But here you can see you can feed the Chao. You don't have to feed them to keep them alive. It's really just to raise their stamina stat, and I think it may also increase their happiness, which comes into play when the Chao is about to pass. They can either reincarnate as a new egg, which is the same Chao, just you'll start its life cycle over, or they can pass away forever if they are unhappy. If you really want to learn about Chao raising, then you can visit chaoisland.com. It's a really good resource for Chao raising and talks about all the different versions of the Chao Garden that we've seen. You can pet them and play with them a little bit, and basically just have a good time with your Chao. Another thing you can do is, you may have seen the little animals that come out of the enemies in the stages. You can actually give those to your Chao, and they will gain the animal's appearance and abilities. So their arms and their legs and tails will turn into different animal things. And that's really interesting because you can change the aesthetics of your Chao. Right here, I'm showing you the black market. You can go ahead and purchase things with your rings here. I'm buying a white egg just because white's one of my favorite variations of the colors the chow come in. Although, to be honest, my very favorite variation is really just the normal type, which you get at the start of the game, just because there's so much variation in what they can look like. Like, you can evolve the chow and change their appearance, and there are a lot of different ways they can look. But if you have a normal colored chow, it will look a different color depending on what its evolution is, whereas the other chow simply stay a solid color throughout their entire lifetime. And to hatch the egg, you just give it a good shake, and you set it down, it'll start to hatch. You can actually hatch the chow a couple other ways. One, of course, is to throw it at a wall if you're that impatient. The chow probably won't like it very much, but it might forgive you. And then the other way is you can actually just leave the egg alone and it'll hatch on its own. But if you want to speed up the process without throwing it at a wall, the best thing to do is to pick up the egg, hold the action button, and move the stick, which will let you shake the egg, and then it'll hatch a little faster. I'm taking this white chow on a trip. We're going to visit the other unlockable gardens. There's one for each adventure field. This here is the Mystic Ruins garden. It's nice. I don't really care for the aesthetics of the first game's gardens nearly as much as I do the second ones, but they're alright for what they are. And I know chow raising isn't for everyone, but I really get a lot of enjoyment out of it, at least when I actually try. And so I will also show you your chow can get better at things like swimming. This chow is apparently unable to swim because I really haven't done anything with these chow. And in this game, that little machine to the right of the teleporters is a chow naming machine. You can also use it to send your chow away, but I don't send my chow away personally. I like them too much for that. So I'm going to go ahead and actually give this chow a name. I'm going to name him something that I think is cute. So we step onto the machine with the chow in tow. You see the options. You can name it or say goodbye to it. I choose to name it. And you have a lot of different options for what you can put in the name. I personally, most of the time, just use the English characters. And I'm going to name this little guy Puff, because I think that's cute. So once you've named it, you just click OK. And then you quit out of the machine. And you'll be able to see the chow's name on its stats card. See, it's called Puff now. So then lastly, I'm going to go take you to the final garden, which is really interesting. It's an island, but it's got Eggman's face all over it because it's like, I guess it's supposed to be one of his bases or something. But this is the one you can get off of Eggman's airship. And it's a really interesting garden to say the least. I honestly think I'd like this aesthetic a little bit more if they hadn't done the Eggman influences, but I think it's kind of fitting just based on where this garden is located. Lastly, I'm going back to the Station Square garden because I want to show you that you can enter your chow into races. If you enter this door that you can see on the right hand side of the screen, it's basically on the opposite side of the wall from the door that leads to the black market and the exit of the chow garden. You enter the chow race. And I just chose a beginner race because that's all I had unlocked. I mean, my chow have basically no stats, so they aren't going to do very well. But I did just want to show this feature off. I chose the Pearl course, and I played the PC version of this game originally. This version that I'm playing right now is actually the Xbox 360 version, which I am playing through backwards compatibility on my Xbox One. And that's actually how I'm able to get footage of this game. But they're rolling a ball at the beginning of this race, which I never even saw in the version that I played. So I'm not sure if they added this for this version or what that is, but I'll spoil the ending. I don't think my Chao wins this race, but it is cute to watch them, and you can cheer them on by pressing the spacebar. I'm not sure exactly how that works in this game. In the sequel, in the battle version of Sonic Adventure 2, you can actually cheer them on, and it will reduce the amount of stamina they have for a boost of speed. So you have to be kind of strategic about it, and you can see they made it to the end, and well, you know, that's about how that ended. But this feature can be fun. I think there's a lot more to it in the other game, but it's a fun little part of this side mode. And that really about wraps it up as far as Chao Gardens are concerned. It's a lot of content added on the side, so I did talk a lot about it, and that's mainly just because I really like the Chao Garden. This version isn't great compared to some of the others, but it's okay if this is your first time with the Chao. It's a good little experience. And if you have the Steam version of the game, there's even a program online that you can download which actually edits Chao, which is fun to mess around with. And I think that about wraps it up for this game. I'm gonna stop before the video gets too much longer. I would say overall this game is a 10 on 10 for me, because it's a really solid game and it houses so many of my memories. I do like the sequel better, but you know, this one is really good. I would recommend it if you haven't played a Sonic game before, or if you have and you enjoyed it to any degree, because it's really just a fun time with all these different characters.